Okay.
Okay. So welcome everyone. So we have with us today Diana Madroane and Arkadius Wisniovski. Diana has a PhD in philosophy and she's an assistant professor of applied linguistics and cultural studies at the West University of Timisoara in Romania. And her main specialization is critical discourse analysis and rhetorical and practical argumentation. And she is also editor-in-chief of gender studies. And Arkadius Wisniovski has a PhD in economics, and he's senior lecturer and head of department of statistics at the University of Manchester. And his research focuses on integrating traditional and new forms of data analysis, especially for predicting demographic change, migrations, and mobility. So the floor is yours, Diana, if you want to begin. You're all good.
Thank you. Thank you again for inviting me. I'm delighted to be here. I will be giving a short introduction first together with my colleague Arek, and then we will each give our talks. I just want to say that I can't share my screen.
Oh, wait, I will make you a co-host and you should be able to do that.
Okay, thanks. I just want to say that my PhD was in philology, like in letters. Yeah.
Okay, you should be able to share your screen now.
Okay, thanks. So I'm not used to Zoom. I hope you can see
working fine.
My screen.
Yes, we can. Yes.
Okay, I'll just try to run the slideshow. So we thought that we should first give an introduction into the topic, and I thought it might be interesting for the group, for the participants to find out some aspects related to Romanian migration as it is seen from the sending country. I have been looking at Romanian migration within the European Union for many years, and over some time, I have been taking a transnational approach. And from this perspective, the understanding of the phenomenon and what is going on in the sending country is just as important and what is going on in the host country. After the fall of communism in 1989, Romania has become a massive source of net emigration. Globally, but especially in the European Union. And you have a graph here that shows that it has exceeded by far all its neighboring countries. And I believe the levels of emigration from Romania can be only compared to those from Poland among the Central and Eastern European states. Currently, the Romanian Ministry of Foreign Affairs places the number of Romanian migrants abroad at 5.7 million. But according to unofficial estimates, there may be as many as 8 million Romanians abroad. And many of them have emigrated to other European Union countries for economic purposes. For over a decade, the main destination countries have stabilized at Italy, Spain, Germany, the UK, and France, where over 85% of Romanian migrants in Europe are concentrated right now. Here you have a table with the different waves of emigration from Romania. There is no time to go into details. The UK and Ireland appeared as destinations for Romanian emigrants in the period 1995-2001, but that was more of an exploratory stage of circular and irregular migration. But this is when certain networks and structures started being formed. And emigration from Romania took an impetus after the year 2002, when Romanians could travel in the Schengen area without a visa. And the UK really became a destination for Romanian migrants during the economic recession, because it was then that countries that were favorite destinations, such as Spain, were hit hard by the recession, and then Romanians remigrated to Germany, the UK, and the Scandinavian countries. The early period is relevant for Romanian Roma migration, the beginning of the 1990s, and in the British media, which will be the topic of my talk later, there were a lot of representations, negative representations of Romanian Roma as bogus asylum seekers, because back then Romanians were still applying for asylum. So in this graph, you have the 4 of the main destination countries. I'm not sure why France is not there, because I imagine you'd have been interested in that, with the pickup to Germany and the UK during the economic recession, basically. The reasons Romanians have for emigrating are economic, primarily unemployment, but also political corruption and instability. And for high-skilled migrants, a desire for better working conditions and career prospects. But what is also important, because the trend of emigration for Romania has not stopped, it's growing apparently, is what Ruxandra Trandafoiu calls the social imaginary of emigration, with the young generations and people in Romania being able to build up expectations and imagine their lives and journeys abroad, which also fosters emigration. Again, something that I can't go into, but if there is an interest, we can discuss later. There have been major transformations in Romania society brought about by immigration, positive effects, but also negative effects, which have required policy interventions, and many times the interventions have not been exactly what was needed. So the policy response is lagging behind. And transnational practices, relations, and identities have been formed. This category of the new Romania diaspora has become a permanent topic on the public agenda. And it has also been constructed in the Romanian media and public spheres as a public problem, something I researched in a project led by Professor Camelia Beciu with colleagues and friends from Bucharest, Marina Ciocea and Alexandru Cârlan. And some of my data and the findings I'm going to present today are related to this project. So in the Romanian media and in the public sphere, over the years, and especially after our accession to the European Union in 2007, symbolic categories and representations of Romanian migrants have entered the public imaginary. And they can be divided into those about highly skilled migrants and low-skilled migrants. In terms of exodus, for doctors, engineers, young people, the brain drain, the brain exodus, but also exploitation and victimhood, Romanian slaves, the low-skilled workers, the children and the parents left behind, the strawberry pickers, the elderly care workers, women predominantly, and crime, which is related to the Roma. Heroes, victims, and anti-heroes, we have an entire panoply of these categories of migrants, and a sort of essentialization and instrumentalization of the new Romanian diaspora in various claims formulated by institutional and public actors. And something that can also be of interest would be Romanian media responses to perceived discrimination of Romanian migrants in destination countries. There have been campaigns organized in response to what has been published in the British media about Romanians, also in the French media. I will pass the floor now to my colleague, to Arek Wisniovski, my panel colleague. And Arek, please let me know when I should stop share screen to let you do that.
Okay. I can. Okay, I can go on now with this. So I just very briefly mention what's the situation of Romanians in the UK. So here's a graph and shows the change of Romanian nationals, so nationality of migrants living in the UK between 2001 to 2015. We can see a massive increase, relative increase of Romanians. Of course, the largest increase in absolute terms was from Poland. It was about 20-fold increase from few thousand to shy of 1 million people. But Romania also denoted a huge increase, and 2015 was just after the UK opened the labor market for the Romanian migrants, because there was the EU accession was 2007, but there was a 7 years period of the protecting of the labor market. So that's 2014, 2015, that's when the labor market was open. Can you please move to the next slide? Yeah, so this is the results from the from the most recent census, 2021, that happened in March last year. So if you go to the Office for National Statistics website, you will see that the figure 2 shows that the large increase in the number of people in England and Wales who were born in Romania. So these are the shows that there was a change in a large change of Romanian people born in Romania. They become the 4th largest subpopulation, migrant population, after Indians, Polish, and Pakistani. But what's interesting also is that actually there are few more people who hold a Romanian passport. So the largest group is Polish nationals, but the second largest, and it's a massive relative increase again, is Romanians. And it's what's interesting, if you move to the next slide, is that actually it's a there are more people who have Romanian passport, that there are more people than people who are born in Romania. So that means that perhaps children or relatives were getting those passports. Okay, maybe you can move to the next slide, and I'll then share the screen. So here is so that was migrant stocks. Now it's immigration flows. What I would like to also point out, so the green bars represent immigration from Romania to the UK reported by the United Kingdom, by the Office for National Statistics, and the red bars are reported by Romanian Statistical Office. And you can see that and this is from Eurostat, so the official data that were validated in Eurostat. So you can see that 2018 is reported, and you can actually maybe see that in 2002 to 2007 or 8, there are some bars. They're just very, very, very tiny. They are like 50 to 200 persons. That's what was recorded pre-EU accession, and it doesn't really match with what was recorded by the UK's International Passenger Survey. We can see that again, 2013, 2014, and then 15, 16 is a peak of migration, and there's a kind of a dip in 2018 and 19. But yeah, so one thing that I would like to point out, which is kind of my area of research, is that this data reported by various countries are not necessarily comparable. So one has to be careful when analyzing such data. Could I then share screen now?
Yeah.
And come back to the, could I have a right to share? Okay, I should have now. All right, so I just wanted to very quickly show you can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is the results from the census data. So that's the question, where are they? Where are the Romanian people? So these are the people who hold a Romanian passport as of 21st of March 2021. So we can see that they are quite a lot in London. It's quite interesting that they are in the Northamptonshire and in the city of Northampton. I don't know much about that city, so I will show you where I am now, which is Manchester. So I just want to show you that this data can actually go to very, very low level geography, as you can see. So this area, this is university. These are where the houses of residents are. This is where I am now. But if you just zoom in, you can see that even the small areas are shown. And so these are the output areas, they're the smallest areas of the census. So you can see that these are the halls of residence. These are the halls of residence. This is not the halls of residence, so that's interesting that there are some people, Romanian people living there. But this kind of lets you analyze how those kind of spatial patterns, where do Romanian people go, and what you can compare that with, say, Polish people, who are much more concentrated, say, in here. Okay. I don't know, Diana, do you want to move on to the last slide that you had, or should I continue with my?
Do you have it?
I do.
Okay.
Is it that one?
It may be easier for you to display it then. Okay. Just a few words to finish about the Romanian diaspora in the UK. Romanian sociologists place the majority, many of the Romanian migrants in the UK in the category of construction workers. So there is a concentration of migrants in construction and also seasonal agricultural workers. The diaspora is quite diverse. There are also migrants in hospitality and tourism, in healthcare and NHS. And they even gained positive visibility during the COVID-19 pandemic, and highly skilled entrepreneurs and professionals, but also very vulnerable migrants. The diaspora, the Romanian diaspora in the UK is engaged in Romania by voting, remitting not only money, but also social cultural remittances and political in the sense of wanting to change Romanian society, and they have been involved in protesting. There are quite a number of diasporic organizations in the UK, and they have been recently mapped in a study by Martinescu and Balaț-Pașcu. They place their activity in the category of active but insufficiently impactful, both in terms of relating to the authorities in the UK and making a cause for Romanians in the UK there, but also in terms of the impact they can have transnationally in their relationship with the home country. On the other hand, there is a post-Brexit civic awareness. There are forms of political engagement. And there has been a recognition, as I have mentioned, of their civic engagement in the UK during the pandemic. So very briefly, this would be the situation of the Romanian diaspora currently, and of course, probably the pandemic and Brexit are still going to change and to make an impact upon these dynamics. So Arek will continue now with his talk, which is about how to establish reliable ways of estimating the number of migrants, right?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Okay, and then you will follow with the more in-depth analysis. Yes, so I'm a statistician or economist and statistician, and I will present your work on nowcasting or forecasting Romanian migration to the UK with the help of a Google search engine. And this is a joint work. Can you see the screen? Sorry, just confirm the presentation.
Yes.
Okay, excellent. So this is a joint work with Andreea Romescu, who was my master's student. She was doing the master's in data science in our department. Now left academia, but we managed to produce this nice work, I think. So this is a paper published in Demographic Research. You can find it under this link. And I would like to also acknowledge funding from myself from the Future Migration Scenarios for Europe project, which is funded by the Horizon 2020 and is led by University of Aalborg. And this particular paper is part of work package 4.1 that looks at various temporal definitions and different ways of estimating and forecasting migration. So you can find more details about the project at the futuremigration.eu. There are quite many qualitative aspects there, so you might be interested in that as well. Okay, so I'll move on. First, it's so I showed you the graph earlier about immigration flows of persons born in Romania to the UK, shown by two various sources. So why forecasting? Why do we want to forecast or nowcast migration? So first of all, it's forecasting in general is difficult because of migration, because it's a process that is susceptible to shocks. There are multiple drivers, both at origin country, destination country, at other countries when we are talking about bilateral movements. And also there are many individual factors at play. Further, we have data on migration. As you can see, they are imperfect in the sense that, say, International Passenger Survey is a not very perfect source for measuring migration. It's never been. It's been meant to measure the air traffic, of passengers, not migration, but they used a question in it that let authorities define migration. It's been replaced during COVID by the administrative sources, but until 2019 it was in use. So the data can vary in definition. So for example, this little differences here, that there's a quite larger number here and very small number here, is because Romania defined migrants as those who leave Romania permanently, whereas in the UK the definition is those who are staying or planning to stay for more than 12 months are immigrants. So that changes the interpretation and the results, of course. But there's also issues with coverage. For example, Romanians don't, as far as I remember, they don't treat returning nationals as immigrants. There's underreporting when people fail to register from the population register, and accuracy, for example, in the National Passenger Survey has a sampling error. Another issue is a timeliness. So, for example, if you look at the Eurostat database, the usual reporting of the immigration or migration flows in general is with about 22 months delay. So if you want to have meaningful policies and check whether there are changes, dramatic changes, potentially dramatic changes in trends of migration flows, this information is delayed. So in the UK, for example, in the UK, the current system relies on about half-year delay, maybe 5 months delay. So yesterday there were results for last year migration, and it was recorded that it's the largest net migration ever to the UK, but not Romanians. Not Romanians who drove that. Okay, so I move on because I digress. So one of the assumptions of this work is that there exists, so because traditional data sources are not always reliable, not always available, and not always timely, we have new forms of data, and there's some in recent years, let's say 20 years, maybe 10 years, there have been a bit of a research into using new forms of data in estimating migration mobility. There are several reviews on various types of data. You can check also about methods that they contributed. And they mostly focus on social media data, mobile phone data. Google Trends data have been used a little bit in studies of specifically labor mobility, but there was nothing really much about forecasting or nowcasting performance. So if we want to predict the current changes, the most recent changes in migration, Google Trends has been used quite extensively in predicting stock market prices, employment, health, tourism, and several other things. The criticism was that this data should not be used alone. There was a famous paper in the Science journal by later colleagues about Google flu trends that worked fine for some time, and then when actually people learned that it can predict flu, then it fell apart. So we need to have some benchmarks. There's also a question of representative, whether data are representative. So if the kind of implicit assumption is that people use internet, have access to internet, and people use Google. Yes, and it's kind of uniform across the population, which, you know, we may pose questions whether it is indeed the case. In Romania, I think the use of internet has been increasing dramatically over the last 10 years, and well, it's difficult to check whether Google is popular, but according to estimates, it is. 95% of the market is Google. Okay, so the research question, particular research question tackled in this little work was whether Google Trends data can reduce this short-term forecast or nowcast error. So nowcast, if you want to forecast what is happening right now, because we have access to Google Trends data, which are available right now, but we have immigration data or migration data with quite large delays, and we are not 100% sure whether they are reliable. Okay, so in this work, I'll be using data on immigration flows by country of birth from Romania to the UK, and they are from the IPS because that was what was available at the time. And we decided not to dive into COVID-related issues because there were no data, simply. There was no official data then for this migration, at least not in the UK. And the Google Trends, which was obtained using programmatically using gTrends-R package. Okay, so this is just very quickly because I need to be conscious of time. This is how Google Trends looks like. So we can search for keywords or search terms in Romania. This is United Kingdom in English language. This is Rhetorical unit. I understand this is the Romanian meaning of this word of the United Kingdom, and it's searched in Romania from 2008 to 2022 till yesterday, and we can see the relative interest in that in those words. There were some changes in this algorithm, so I'll be using data from 2012 onwards only, until 2019. We can see, for example, here there's a spike because of the Brexit referendum. This is June 2016, and this is perhaps the most recent changes of the government, which also spiked interest in Romania. Yeah, so the data migration I showed you, and this is the Google Trends Index. So this is an interest scale to 0 to 100 values, so not number of searches, but the relative interest. And we gathered data on this interest from January 2012 to December 2019. They're monthly. And we used a lexical approach, so-called a lexical approach, where we used hypernyms, so kind of family words, like employment, education, housing, found. So hypernym is like an animal for cats, dogs, or other animals. So, and then we found synsets using a natural language toolkit and WordNet corpus reader synsets, so all the sets of synonyms. I just very quickly show you how it looks like. So these are those. So can you see the screen still, the website? So for example, for employment, we have occupation, job, line of work, career, work, etc., etc. For education, there will be many other. For pound, many other. And those words were used both in English and in Romanian. So you can find all of this information on my GitHub website, and there's also code to reproduce these results. Okay, I'm happy to talk about that more if you're interested later. We also had a control set of random words to just check whether there's a real signal there or not. So we used this 4 hypernyms: employment, education, housing, and pound, representing currency for us set key search words, search terms. And we created Google Trend indices, so an index representing interest in specific area. So for all 4 of them, then all of them together, and one control. So there were 6 Google Trend indices. And we averaged them annually with a lagged monthly window. So this lagged monthly window, I show you maybe first this one, is to account for the fact that people may not necessarily search a next day travel. It may happen that they're checking information just before the travel, but usually there is a delay, and some literature suggests that it might be about 6 months before when there's an interest expressed in migration and actual event. So that's why we look at this monthly window where we are just aggregating these results from January to December, December to November, October to November to October, and so on and so on. So there is like a moving window change, and we can see that those changes with different lag, different window lag, are looking slightly different when we aggregate into annual. So this plot shows the immigration data against those averages. So the Google Trend Index is basically average of these interests across all the synsets for given hypernym word like education, employment, housing, etc. And we can see that they actually do represent different things. So this is employment, and we can see that somehow matches a little bit this increase in the immigration. There is some correlation, and a little less for education, and so slightly different one for currency and different one for housing, which is a bit flat. The control one is also quite flat, so that doesn't show much of the variability here. Okay, so the methods used in the in this work were statistical methods, the time series methods. I just very quickly explained that we used a benchmark model or control situation where we use migration at year T to predict, sorry, we want to use migration at last year to predict the current year. It is a autoregressive model. So this model does not include anything from the Google Trend Index, and it's kind of like a naive. So if this parameter is 1, this is a naive prediction. And it's quite commonly used in predicting migration or predicting well, many other time series. And then we have a test model, which is we introduced the Google Trend Index as a predictor. So on top of this model, we have the GTI for year T, which is aggregated annual and aggregated for a given window with this lag, so given delay of 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, etc., etc. So K is from 0 to 12, no delay, and the full 12 months delay. And we also use the autoregressive and random walk specification. So this one assumes that there's some kind of stability, long-term stability, and this one assumes that there's no long-term stability. It can be kind of very random. So this is like very naive prediction. So for the inference, we use the Bayesian inference because we have only 8 observations in 2012 to 2018, 2019 data. And the classical approach would just produce very large uncertainty. And because international passenger survey data have uncertainty kind of produced by the Office for National Statistics, can be derived from the tables that they produce, this inference was much more useful because we could learn about this variance from the data. So it's really good when we have small number of observations, but it also allows incorporating the expert opinion if we had such, or we didn't at the time. I can talk, and I use the STAN programming language implemented in R, and it's a way of sampling from the posterior distributions in Bayesian inference, so produce so we have prior beliefs, we have evidence and data, and Bayesian inference, what it does, it just produces some kind of an average of the two. And prior beliefs can be quite flat, can be quite weakly informative, so then we give preference to the evidence, to the data, and that's what we assumed in this model. I'm happy to discuss that more if you're interested. So how we implemented this thing is we produced forecasts for 2018 and 2019 using respective data from 2013 to 2017 for this one, and 2013-18 for 2019. And so we assume that the data on migration are not available for the current year, but we had data for the Google Trend Index because they are available for right now. They are pretty much instantaneous. And we used mean error and mean absolute percentage error to assess whether there is a reduction in forecast error. We also used various combinations of data to check robustness of the results, and they were quite robust, even with this amount of information. So very quickly, this is a big table, but let me just show you that when we, for example, look at the control hypernym, so completely random words, we have these two models, AR and R, autoregressive and random walk. And when we look at the model, when we added the Google Trend Index with a 6-month delay, it pretty much doesn't change much, doesn't change anything. But when we look at employment, there is a little bit of a, especially with the random walk model, naive prediction that assuming that migration is not a stable process, there is a bit of a pickup of some signal, and this Google Trend Index actually can pick up some change of a trend in 2018. So the data were from 2013 to 2017, and we predicted 2018. Slightly similar story happens for education, except for that it perhaps doesn't really go in the right direction. And that was a forecast for 2018. So to predict this very dramatic kind of change of migration, a drop about half in immigration flows. For 2019, so we use the data from 2014 to 2018. In this case, again, we see that the control doesn't really change much between the benchmark and when we use this case 12 months delay and delayed Google Trends. But here the employment, the model that assumes stable migration shows that there is actually quite big change when we introduce the Google Trend Index. So that kind of demonstrates that there might be some little bit of a potential of reducing forecast errors. We can also see that the overall kind of mixture of all of these hypernyms, search terms in Google, and interest based on that doesn't really change dramatically the result. There's a little bit of an improvement, but it's a little bit of a fluke, I would say, here in this case, because we are not really predicting well 2018, and that's why the 2019, which is some kind of a follow of this new trend, is showing up. So overall, when we just aggregate over all lags, because it's very difficult to decide what kind of a lag you should choose. What is this delay in between search and actual migration, and how it is being shown in annual data. And this annual data are also recalculated, because in the UK they are calculated from June to June or July to June. They are transformed to the annual from January to December, so it's quite complicated. But what we can see is that employment and education hypernyms, so those keywords or search words related to employment and education, have potential, quite large potential, to reduce the forecast errors in the predicted migration. To some extent, it's also housing-related variables, and that's for both 2018 to 2019 year. And what was I going to say? Okay, and then that's with the assumption that the models are stable. So for the random walk models, the story is a little bit less promising, but well, in general, if we see this reduced error across the board for all lags, that kind of offers some promise that there is a potential to reduce forecast errors when we want to predict nowcast migration as of now, so predict any kind of sudden changes of the number of migrants right now, and that Google Trend Index may give some hints about that. So to summarize, because I think should be time for that now, given the context of a quite complex recent history of migration from Romania to the UK and changes in these regimes, so accession to the EU, there was some scheme where Romanians could come to the UK with some permission. I don't remember, it was something similar to workers registration scheme, like was for Polish migrants, and then opening of the labor market fully in 2000, I think it was 2014. So we can see that given this context, and then the Brexit referendum, perhaps anti-immigration campaigns, I probably should say that campaigns by the government and other parties, we can see that those things influence the individual decisions about migration. And given this context, plus the context of relatively poor data, we can see that the search engine information as collected in Romania may show the potential interest in migration and relative interest of how this changes in respect to this information from the both sending and receiving countries, because the context in Romania is also important. I think that there's the population and large immigration context with the financial crisis. I think there was one in 2012, if I remember correctly. Diana, you may correct me, or all of the audience can correct me. And there are varying reductions depending on the GTI timing. So there's this question, what exactly might be this kind of difference in time between interest in migration and actual act of migration, plus not everyone who is interested will obviously migrate. So are Google Trends data useful in general? They have some potential to indicate current trends in migration flows. We can at least study the interest in migration, or interest in specific aspects of migration. They may or may not improve forecast accuracy, so that depends on, again, this GTI timing, and also depends on the models that we are using. And the models I use are quite simplistic, and also the data at hand are quite short, so that a lot limits this kind of proper assessment. Plus, it's only one case study. However, what I would say, and what we come up with my student, is that this forecasting, this use of this Google Trends data requires understanding of migration-related context and behaviors, and also the way of using the Google search engine or use of internet at the origin country. This Google Trends can be susceptible to hot topics, for example, changes in the government, or Brexit referendum, which spiked a lot in many countries, interest in the UK in general. Yeah, so that's why we use this kind of annual averages to smooth out this effect. And I mentioned that the limited length of series also poses a problem in use of this data. So these are the references that I use throughout the presentation. And thank you very much. I think I should give the floor now to Diana, am I right?
Thank you.
I don't know if there are any questions, immediate questions, clarification questions.
Suppose we'll take questions at the end.
Okay, fine.
Yeah.
I will stop sharing then.
Thanks a lot.
Okay. So can you see my screen now?
Indeed, yes.
Okay, thank you. I can go on for quite a while, so feel free to stop me because I think it's important that we have some time to discuss. My presentation is from a very different area than Arek's, but there is some intersection point in the sense that I'll be looking at the British media and the British pro-Brexit newspapers. And there has been a process of politicization of these estimates of incoming flows. It was prominent in the British media at different important moments for immigration from the CE states to the UK. So that would be one area of intersection. In my talk, I will present findings from my analysis of a corpus of newspaper articles about Romanian immigrants and Romanian immigration to the UK, selected during the EU referendum debate from pro-Brexit British newspapers. As you probably are aware, British newspapers took, and the British media overall took partisan positions during the EU referendum debate openly, supporting either leave or remain. And my purpose in this presentation will be to show how the newspapers used certain themes and representational patterns of Romanian migrants and immigration to make prominent premises in an argument supporting the claim that Britain should exit the European Union. I will be referring to previous representations in other corpora that I have analyzed, and if there is time, I can say a few words about what has happened after the votes in terms of the formation of a diasporic Romanian counterpublic. I will be relying on published articles. The most important ones are on this slide. The 2018 one appeared in a volume that I co-edited with my colleagues from Bucharest as an outcome of the project I mentioned, but I will also use older publications of mine, and this has been a topic of research very important and central throughout my academic journey. I did my PhD on it as well, so I will take you back in time to look at some data from 2006. My guiding research questions for this talk are: how did the representations and evaluations of Romanian immigrants and immigration to the UK feature in the premises of the practical argument supporting Brexit as a course of action in the selected corpus, of course, and how were the British publics engaged and positioned in this process? When I did this research, I used a larger corpus. I also included the Telegraph and the pro-Remain newspapers, The Guardian and The Observer. Today, I will be illustrating my findings from the Daily Mail, The Express, and The Sun, three conservative-leaning mid-markets and tabloids. For several reasons. One has to do with the impact they were attributed in studies carried out post the referendum vote, the impact on the outcome. The other reason has to do with the fact that I want to make some cross-references with previous analysis of mine, and I focused upon these newspapers at other times in the past. And also with their readership, which for the Daily Mail and The Sun has been constantly over the years high, as these recent data also show. Very briefly, a few words about my analytical framework. I won't insist because I know that many of you are in cultural studies. My own background is in applied linguistics. So I have looked at the EU referendum debate as centered upon practical argumentation, which involves deliberating in order to decide what to do. In that case, should the UK remain in the European Union or should the UK leave the European Union? Practical arguments typically take arguers from a set of circumstances, including the context of action and a problem they are confronted with, to a desired state of affairs formulated as a goal via a means and premise that is a proposed course of action. And the deliberation involves weighing the pros and cons of various proposed courses of action in order to reach a reasonable decision on what to do. And what is very important in this context is weighing the consequences. If the consequences are seen as unacceptable and are shown to be unacceptable, then the proposed course of action should not be taken. And if they are acceptable and do not conflict with other goals the agents have, then the action should be taken. Framing in this context involves looking at the ways in which various premises are made salient for the audiences or for other agents of deliberation, so as to steer them towards accepting a certain conclusion, a certain context of action. And in using of this framework, I'm relying upon an approach developed by Isabella and Norman Fairclough. The process of framing also involves making particular aspects relevant to the audience in terms of their concerns, values, and goals, because the circumstances premise and the goal premise in this argument are related, are underlain by values as normative sources. And I have also, in my work, I've also used instruments from discourse analysis for analyzing representations and evaluations, and also from semiopragmatics, because I look at the British newspapers as media dispositives in which arguments, practical arguments have been enacted. In this case, however, it was not really deliberation that the British newspapers I am referring to engaged in. It was more rather advocacy. It was a one-sided argument oriented towards persuading the British publics to vote leave and also mobilizing them to do so. I also start from a series of research premises and theoretical background, but I will very quickly go through them, primarily the symbolic power of the media and its role in constructing social reality by providing publics with resources for knowledge identification and action. And in the framework I'm using, primarily these are reasons for action, but also emotions and values. The construction of economic migration from the Central and Eastern European EU member states as a public problem, something that started in the years 2000, and that can be correlated with another public problem in the British media and political sphere, that is Britain's EU membership that goes back to the 1960s and 70s. I also started from the notion that the EU immigration issue was central to the Leave campaign, and that British newspapers, especially those I'm talking about today, exerted an important influence on the pro-Brexit, on the Brexit vote, on the Leave vote, as was demonstrated by communication scholars and sociologists later on. From the premise that there was a resonance already among British Brexit voters of right-wing Eurosceptic populist and nationalist narratives, stances, and claims, brilliantly summed up, I would say, in this Take Back Control slogan. Elements that can also be related to a nativist ideology and even conspiracy theory, something that I looked at in a follow-up study. The resonance can be upheld by looking at Eurobarometer and Ipsos Mori surveys that showed the Euroscepticism and the high concern for immigration among the British public over the years, and also upon a gradual strengthening of anti-immigration narrative stances and claims in the British public sphere, and what Balch and Balabanova see as a convergence between right and left-wing positions at the time of the EU referendum that had to do with the main parties trying to prevent losing out votes to the UKIP. There are a number of other important mechanisms going on, such as the racialization of the CE migrants, a new form of cultural racism, something that was brought to prominence by Fox, Moroșanu, and Silasi in an article in 2012. Also a Balkanist gaze on the immigrants from the Central and Eastern European space, seen as semi-civilized, poor, backward. My claim is that there was already a wide repertoire of representations, positionings, and claims about Eastern European immigrants and immigration, and that what was dominant were these anti-immigration positionings and claims at the time. And what was also important to explain, for explaining how this process of persuading and mobilizing the British publics worked, was the position, the self-assumed role of these newspapers as advocates and champions of the people, something that they had been doing again for many years. And I first came across this when analyzing a corpus in 2006 before Romania became an EU member. The Brexit context was preceded by several crises as well, the economic recession, the refugee crisis, terrorist attacks, and also by what many scholars see as a failure by both Labour and Conservative parties to adequately address and represent the concerns of British citizens regarding EU immigration. So I will probably go quite fast across the next slides, but I have analyzed corpora from 2006, the year before Romania became an EU member, from 2013, the year before the transition controls were lifted, what Arek mentioned as well. So these were key years in terms of public debates on what to do regarding immigration from Romania. And also from 2011, when it was towards the end of the economic recession, the Romanian diaspora in the UK was quite large at the time. And also the year in which they announced that the transition controls would be extended. So my point is to show that the representational patterns and the themes that we saw in these newspapers being emphasized during the EU referendum had already been in place, had been quite established in the British public imaginary at the time. And these are representations from 2006 on these slides. And you can notice the large incoming numbers, drawing attention to the large incoming numbers and to how the British government got it wrong in 2004 when they opened the labor market without transition controls for the A8 countries. Poland was among them. So back then, the experts consulted by the Home Office announced there would be incoming numbers of 13,000 per year, and the actual numbers were 10 times or over 10 times higher than that. And that's also because UK was one of only 3 countries that opened the labor market for migrants from Eastern Europe. In 2004, alongside Ireland and Sweden, and all the other countries imposed transition controls, something that the expert had not taken into consideration. And since then, there was this constant game of numbers and politicization of figures and blaming the government, and the Labour Party had a lot to lose in the long time. in the long run. So here you have examples from my corpus in 2006, where these numbers are also associated constantly with crime, with metaphors of invasion, attack, of Britain being a container that would be filled by Romanian immigrants, disease-related statistics as well. A lot of the crime and disease-related statistics have to do with the Romanian Roma, but this is transferred overall to Romanian immigrants and to other Eastern European immigrants. Collectivizations, armies, mobs, gangs, negatively connoted, hordes, undesirables, criminal underclass. Functionalizations, that is classifications having to do with what occupation that could be neutral, but most often the migrant workers were contextually related to various illegal activities, or even considered cheaper foreigners, fraudsters, beneficiaries of welfare, and so on. Another trend that continued and was prominent during the Brexit referendum was the association with immigration from other areas, in particular Turkey, a possible future EU member state, immigrants from Turkey, immigrants from the Republic of Moldova, from African countries. So there was a constant overlap in public discourse in the pro-Brexit newspapers between migrants from various other parts of the world and Central and Eastern European immigrants. And this emerged in my research, for example, for the first time in 2006, these types of associations, and overall a powerlessness of British politicians because of EU integration and because of Britain's EU membership, and of representing EU immigration as a problem and a threat. And in terms of representation, and this is again something that I identified in the Brexit corpus as well, you have on the one hand these generic representations and collectivizations, and on the other, various portrayals of specific immigrants that would travel to the UK. In 2006, a lot was made of the poverty in Romania, and here you have two examples of Romanian migrants with their families occupying a lot of space. For example, I think the Express in 2006 dedicated an issue to a family of Romanians, among whom this Gheorghe Ion, who would travel to the UK for money and benefits. And this continued in different corpora. Certain themes could be more prominent. During the recession, it was the competition of jobs for jobs with British nationals. And in 2013, Britain as an El Dorado, a bonanza of benefits and a site of destruction for CE migrants. Britain at breaking point emerged as prominent around that time. So in the referendum corpus, I reconstructed the argument, the practical argument, and all these different representational patterns that had already been elaborated and established in the public imaginary in the UK were drawn upon to present the circumstances premise, the problem that British citizens were faced with in rather apocalyptic terms, I would say. So I will refer a little bit to this premise and to the context of action as presented in the three meat markets. And then what I also emphasized a lot would be the addressing the unacceptable consequences for Britain to remaining in the UK. And that would be countering the argument of the other side. So the dominant thematic patterns and the representations that go with them focused upon crime, the disruption of community cohesion, the dissolution of British local communities, the overburdening of public services and of the housing system, and of the welfare benefit system, and wage depression and unfair competition to British workers. In the small corpus I worked with, Constantly associated with Britain's EU membership as a problem, as the cause of all these effects, negative consequences that had to do with presenting the current state of affairs at the time in the UK. So here, and this is a fear that goes way back to Romania being a lax backdoor to Britain for illegal immigration and for criminals. The portrayals, vivid portrayals of various immigrant figures. Grigory Volkov is a Ukrainian gangster in cahoots with Romanian ones. Various criminals, welfare spongers, and so on. And on the other hand, what was very important both in 2016 and in 2013 already was this dissolution, destruction of local communities in the UK, which was a legitimate concern among the British public. This representation of the Annette Street School in Glasgow, where there were no British-born children, became symbolic in the 2016 corpus in the sense that it appeared repeatedly in several newspapers. And this was constantly, these negative effects were constantly associated with the cause, EU membership and integration. As I've selected other examples, and we can return to some of them maybe, why all of this was happening to the UK and to the British public, because the UK was a member of the European Union. So the consequences of EU membership were constantly highlighted. And the other element that was highlighted was the powerlessness of British politicians to change anything because of EU legislation on the one hand, and there were articles in my corpus that hinted at conspiracies between British politicians and EU elites. And Tony Blair was one of those accused of, for example, being engaged in a policy of spreading multiculturalism in the UK, the so-called Nethergate conspiracy. Andrew Nether was an aide in Tony Blair's cabinet, and he was once said something to this effect, which he later debunked, but this accusation remained and is constantly reproduced in the conservative tabloids in the UK. So all of this led to the image of powerless government, ill-intentioned government, and it created a ground for the newspapers to highlight, to frame the consequences of remaining in the European Union as unacceptable for the UK, because all these trends would intensify. And there have been consistent and prominent associations between EU immigration and immigration from other states, non-EU members, and the estimates being out of control for the British government, the entire immigration policy system being out of control, and especially the figures that they could rely upon being out of control. And for example, David Coleman, who is one of the co-founders of Migration Watch, think tank, often cited in the British conservative media, also mentioned a prediction of his regarding how the white British population would cease to exist, to be the majority, in the UK by the late 2060s. So British citizens were empowered through, first of all, having their viewpoints represented in these newspapers, as opposed to politicians not listening, or in contrast to politicians not listening to them. And they were also empowered through the envisaged action that is voting leave in order to rescue the UK from this apocalyptic current crisis and potential future catastrophe, because this is what these representational patterns, if accumulated, can invoke. That was the basic mechanism through which I tried to show that citizens were empowered in the discourse that the British pro-Brexit tabloids used at the time of the EU referendum. But of course, what came before was also important in the years before the Brexit referendum. Only in those years, nothing could be done. Whereas in 2016, British citizens had a chance to change the course of history for the UK and the current situation. So this type of discourse shares elements, I mean, with populism, and there are a lot of elements of populist discourse, and especially in the marked opposition between the British citizens affected by EU membership and the elites, and that has been discussed by other scholars as well, and elements even of conspiracy theory and of a discourse that amounts to a sort of moral panic at times, which served very well and very coherently in terms of if you wish, rhetorical argumentation, this notion of taking back control, which was the slogan of the Leave campaign. I'm not sure if there is any more time for me to say anything about the counter-public. Probably not.
No, because actually the session was supposed to end at 11:15, I think. So if there are some questions, it'd be good if we could move on to question time.
Okay.
But that you may leave. That will be part of your PowerPoint presentation, right? So you
that was a counter-public emerged, diasporic counter-public in the Romanian diasporic media in the UK, and this is one of the newspapers that use a sort of satirical style, and also in their visual discourse, and this is what they one of the counter arguments or points that they make in relation to what had been going on during the EU referendum debate, and I thought I would end with it. But I'm not, so I'll leave it like that. I'm not sure how to handle my slides, so that the Google app, so that I can also see you without stopping sharing. Sorry about that.
You need to stop sharing. Yeah.
I think I do. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so are there any, Sonia, would you like to, are there any questions? Well, thanks for very interesting presentations. Actually, we welcome multidisciplinary approaches here at MIDIB, and today's session was the perfect illustration of the variety of research which is presented as part of our webinar. So thanks again for doing this. Are there any questions from the floor? Agnes?
Thank you, Vincent. If you would like me to start, I can actually kick off with a question. I had a practical question to start with. You mentioned a few references that seem to be very interesting, Diana. Is there any way you could actually send us your references?
Yeah, sorry, I didn't put slides together because I used work I had done over the years, and it's proved a bit challenging for me to do that. But I will, I can send you, Sonia, my articles and the chapters where you have the references.
Yeah, that would be lovely, thank you. And I had a quick question, but I'm just very interested in the treatment of Euro myths and Euro follies or fake news by the tabloid press, because as you may know, the European Commission set up a blog to fight against Euro myths in the British tabloid press. And I was wondering if you would be interested in comparing the treatment of Romanian immigration in tabloids with other communities, like the Polish community, for example, and if you, if you may have seen similarities or differences that you would like to share with us.
Sure, thanks for the question. I didn't look, I took the Romanian, that's something I didn't mention. I took Romanian migration as relevant for the EU debate, and the corpus I selected only included words like Romanian migrants and Romanian immigration and so on. But other nationalities from the Central and Eastern European states appeared, of course, in the news stories that I looked at and the news articles. I didn't carry out a comparison. I would love to do that with a Polish scholar, I imagine, and I think there is a gap to do a volume to look at different coverage of Eastern European migrants in different, in the British media and in different media. What I noticed in terms of fake news in my corpus, there was a news story about, several news stories about illegal lorry drivers bringing refugees, Syrian refugees into the UK, and that was debunked at different points, but there is also always a question if whether all the people who read the fake news also find out that it is fake once they publish retractions afterwards. So in terms of fake news, that's the only thing that came up. I think there were several cases like this during the EU referendum debate. That would be very interesting to look into. And indeed, this idea of myth being taking form in the coverage.
Okay.
Thank you.
Question, sorry, can you hear us? Yes.
Yes, hello. I have two short questions for Eric. So it is all very interesting. Thank you so much. My first question is, why are the education and employment indicators more reliable when it comes to Romanian immigration? And the second question is, if you've had the chance to analyze more recent data, and if you now cast Romanian immigration to the UK, do you see a real convergence in the data furnished by Google Trends and more traditional sources? And what are your findings or predictions on that immigration to the UK? Thank you.
Thanks a lot. So the question about employment and why employment education, that's a very good question. It's difficult to actually make, let's say, a causal relationship. It's really an association, a statistical association, but it perhaps could be explained by the fact that from what is shown in the literature, that most migrants from Romania seek either job or they come to study. Whether it's a high-skilled job or low-skilled job, it's still an employment, so that's what they're looking for. And there are quite a lot of, at least there were quite some, there were quite a few students from Romania in higher education, so that we've seen that those numbers going up. It somehow went down after actual quitting from the European Union happened in 2019, am I right? Was it 2019? Yes, there was this transition period, various transition periods. The second question, sorry, could you remind me? The second question was about the more recent data. No, we haven't analyzed the more recent data because of COVID. Well, the COVID was a bit of a disruption, and it was disruption on various fronts because first, in the UK, the whole measurement of migration was stopped because International Passenger Survey relied on surveys fielded in person in the airports and in the points of entry to the UK. And because of, well, lockdowns, it was no longer possible. So it was halted in March 2020 and subsequently replaced by a new system, and I don't remember exact name of that, but I can send you a reference of measuring migration using administrative data. So the data that rely on passport control. I might be mixing up things, but there is a registration based on national insurance numbers, on the registration, other registrations, and those. It's not a population register because those things are not linked properly, and there's no such a thing as registration. We don't have an ID in the UK. There's no ID or personal identification number like in other countries in Europe. But it's kind of resembles that idea. And there was also introduction of the border controls, the number of passports being checked, and then checking how many people leave and what's the duration of their stay. And the third question was, I don't remember now, sorry.
I just
Oh,
said
it was two
if you
questions.
have any predictions to make, today, if you now cast Romanian immigration today, what are the trends, or are there any predictions?
Frankly, I don't know. I think now we need to sit down and analyze the census data more properly and see what happened and how this is reflected in both census data, the stocks data, and how it is reflected in the flows data. So how this new system that kind of started running in late 2020 and probably was fielded properly in 2021 and now 2022, how that reflects migration. So I mentioned at the beginning that yesterday there was a publication of the last year's July to June immigration flows, and the net migration hit a record 500,000 people coming to the UK. So, but not from the European Union. Actually, the European Union is in the negative. There's an outflow. It's mostly driven by Afghans, by Ukrainians, and by Hong Kongese. So yeah, I don't know what to predict about Romanian migration, frankly. I think that requires more data analysis. I would probably expect that there wasn't really much of a influx. I might be wrong. It's quite much more challenging now to come from the EU. And there is this, yeah, the environment is not very welcoming. It's pretty much the same environment as for other nations. I mean, those who don't require visa, yeah.
Thank you.
I think we have, oh, sorry. We have a question.
We have a question from Barbara, I think.
Yeah, that's right. From Barbara.
Yeah. Hi. I'm sorry. I don't know why it's gone. My hand up. Yeah, I have a question for Diana. Do you know? Are you working by any chance on media reactions at the moment to the whole border issue and kind of things saying that there's a risk of migrants slipping over the border into Northern Ireland and into Britain? Or do you know if anybody is working on media analysis of that?
No, not yet. I do not know. What I'm planning to look into, I started looking into, was the situation of Romanian workers during the COVID pandemic, because there were cases of exploitation and changes of legislation in certain countries, Germany, for example. But I'm not aware of that situation. I haven't followed it. It sounds like a good topic to analyze.
Yeah, because I'm looking at it, but more from a political point of view, and I was just wondering if anybody is working on it. Yeah.
You may. I think I've read some things about the rebordering of Europe. You may.
Yeah.
Maybe it would help to look up Andrew Gidis' work, but it's from political science.
Yeah, exactly.
And probably he's not looking specifically at this.
Yeah, no, I'd be fascinated to see whether, if whether the media are those kind of newspapers that you were covering, are they looking at that, or is the whole border issue something that they're just not focused on?
At the moment, I wouldn't know. I collected a corpus for the post-pandemic period, but it was not. I haven't noticed that. No,
yeah.
It's just no.
Okay.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I had a question. So I was just wondering, listening to both presentations, I was wondering about the attitude of the Romanian government, because we've pretty much seen the perspective, from Britain. But I was wondering to what extent the Romanian government had encouraged or not immigration to Britain, and to what extent this had evolved in recent years?
Well, open encouragement came first from certain political actors. The most notorious statement was made by President Traian Băsescu, I think in 2010, when he said that since Romania cannot provide good salaries for doctors and teachers and so on, we could just as well let them go and have better career prospects abroad. He was accused. I mean, there was an entire public debate around that statement, and he was attacked by various political opponents. But yes, Romania benefits, and they constantly praise remittances and Romanian migrants as heroic for sending remittances back to Romania. Especially, I mean, they were the saviors of the Romanian economy during the economic recession. So there is that. On the other hand, there is encouragement, or the attempt to put together policies to encourage return, especially for entrepreneurial purposes. And there was a program, the Startup Romania program, but there is still a lot of work to do in that respect. Because many Romanians hesitate to come back since they feel they would not it would not be easy to integrate back into Romanian society for them, and some who come back remigrate afterwards. So there is still a lot of work in that sense. So this would be the situation.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you. I will also have a question for Arek after Sonia asks hers, please.
Thank you. I have a quick question for Diana. It was extremely interesting. So we've been talking about the portrayal of Romanian immigration in British newspapers. I'd like to know, what have Romanian newspapers to say about Romanian emigration and Romanian immigrants to the UK?
Well, Romanian newspapers stood up for Romanians discriminated in the UK. And I can also send you some of my work in that respect, because it would be a lot to cover. But there is this reaction to, protect Romanian immigrants to the UK. And I don't know if you remember, there was a documentary released by Channel 4 in 2015, The Romanians Are Coming, where the main narrator was a Romanian Roma, and where they portrayed Romanians with poor backgrounds, low social class, and or middle, but towards the lower middle class spectrum. And there was indignation in Romania. Romanian authorities, politicians were sort of held accountable for not doing more to protect the reputation and the country brand, Romania's image abroad, and were asked to step in. There were protests among the Romanian diaspora in the UK. But in addition to that, so the reaction in the Romanian media is to immediately show that we have good immigrants, that they contribute to the economies of the host countries, that we have heroes and so on. But on the other hand, there are also self-critical and problematizing reactions, but they come mostly from alternative media and from blogs, that Romania should do more to solve the poverty issue, the discrimination against the Romanian Roma, for example, to do more to preempt the leaving of Romanians who go abroad for economic reasons. So there was also that, but this is a reduced sort of reaction if you compare it to the ones who are trying to protect the image of Romania abroad and to improve the image of Romania abroad and to demonstrate that all our migrants are heroic. They only do positive things.
Thank you, Diana.
Thank you. And my question for Arek would be if you think that policymakers at some point would consider this type of tool for estimating flows of migrants, given all the problems that there are
Yeah, that's a very good question. Can I just add to the previous discussion that I was just checking in a paper I presented. We found that there was this proposed. I don't know if it actually was passed, but there was proposed legislation that was forcing immigrants of working age to send pension contributions to Romania, which was kind of one of the reactions of policymakers in Romania. But to answer your question, there is some interest. Whether it will be such methods are implemented, it's to be seen. So not in this particular context. I mean, the in particular context is that actually the whole project, the Horizon 2020 project, and there were two other projects, and they, in some respect, look at those new forms of data and the ways that they can be integrated or used alone, which I advocate against, to better measure or predict migration in a short term, including short term. So in 2019 or 2018, we were commissioned to work by the European Commission, the DG Employment, to look specifically at the new forms of data, such as Facebook and Twitter data, to see whether they can improve migration statistics. And of course, you have arguments for, and you have arguments, very strong arguments against proprietary data, even if they are, I mean, the proprietary in the sense that they come from a black box in some way. And because they depend on the private ownership, sometimes even one person, as we may have seen recently in the case of Twitter, things may change very dramatically overnight. So the reliance on those data is somewhat questionable, but there is interest. And for example, mobile phone data or satellite imaging data, they are used especially in developing countries because there is no other data. There are no other data for such purposes.
If there are no other questions, I think it's time to come to conclusion and to thank you very much for, I think, two very interesting and enriching presentations. And we're very grateful that you accepted to have the session recorded. So this will be put online. If you want to, Diana, if you want to make your paper available, I think someone was asking, that would be great to send for you actually. And your PowerPoint presentations, maybe, if you don't mind as well, that can be put on the blog, and that can be very useful for everyone. Sonia, would you like to tell us about the next session of the webinar?
Yes, sure, sir. So our next webinar is on the 9th of December, 10 a.m. French time, and we'll have with us Dr. Zib Sattar from Northumbria University in the UK, and she'll talk about aging and mobilities in first generation South Asian immigrants to the UK. Thank you so much.
That's great. Thanks a lot. Well, thanks again.
Thank you too. I would be happy to maybe join the webinar every now and then if I have time, if that's all right. As a member of the audience.
Yeah, sure. Sure, that's great.
I will be following you online at any rate.
That's great. So we send you the. I mean, what time is it again? You said, Sonia.
It's 9 a.m. French time, and it's 11 a.m. for Diana, I think.
Yeah, you're very welcome. So you use the. I mean, either we'll send you directly the link, or you can find it on the MIDI blog and connect from there.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you again.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye for now.